And welcome into PressBox Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles of PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. And with me, as always, on these Monday night excursions into the world of baseball is Ross Grimsley. Ross, how are you tonight?
Everything good, buddy. We're all doing well here in Florida.
All right. And this other guest that we have tonight, who I'm going to introduce in just a moment, is going to talk to us about baseballs and her expertise. She's an astrophysicist who is also an expert on baseball construction, and she's done studies on the baseball. But first, I got to tell you real quick about the Costas Inn. The Costas Inn, there's no doubt everybody in Baltimore knows, it's the place to go for steamed crabs, crab soup, your crab cakes, steaks, salads, whatever it is you want to eat. They got screens all over the restaurant. But during the pandemic, they became well aware of the fact that a lot of people aren't really comfortable going back into restaurants, and they stepped up their game in curbside pickup. Look at their menu online. You can order online, CostasInn.com. The phone number 410-477-1975. The address 4100 North Point Boulevard. The Costas Inn, the place to go, whether you're going to sit down in the restaurant or carry out, take it home. Our joining us now is Dr. Meredith Wills, and no relation to Maury Wills, though, correct, Dr. Wills?
No, and I tell you, I keep almost but not meeting him. It will happen eventually.
All right.
We have a remarkable number of acquaintances in common.
All right. Now, I normally don't do this. I sort of introduce and then plunge into the questions. But Ross, I'm going to let you take over a little bit because you brought Dr. Wills, and I'm going to call you Meredith the rest of the interview. But
that's fine.
But you got to know her through a unique set of circumstances. Why don't you tell our audience about that?
I followed her on social media, and she has a way of examining baseballs, and we're going to get into that. I want to hear when this started and everything, but it was very interesting, and I always follow her. Every time something comes up, I follow her, so it pops up on my Twitter. So that's how I got involved with her, reading that about the baseballs. And I figured, well, I'll reach out to her and see if she'll be on our show. I said, well, I can't believe I waited this long, but I think it's a good time, mainly from the standpoint that now 2022, there's talk about two different baseballs in the major leagues now. So that's something that I want to get into a little bit later, but that's how that I reached out to her, and she was kind enough to be on our show with us. And thank you so much, Meredith. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
So Meredith, before we start talking about the baseball, I want to talk about baseball because I have a feeling that you're a baseball fan, early on. Would I be right?
Yeah. I always love this question because very often the way that it's asked is, how does an astrophysicist become interested in baseball? And frankly, it's the other way around. The story, I tell the story a lot, but it's a great story, which is I was born on opening day, and my dad had grown up a Milwaukee Braves fan, like for the entire duration of the team. So, Hank Aaron was somebody he had watched his whole life. It was also the day that Hank Aaron tied Babe Ruth's home run record. And my dad, who is not particularly religious or superstitious person, but he went out and he bought me a baseball bat the day I was born, which I still have. He was absolutely convinced I was supposed to do something in the game. I was supposed to be important. And, my birth announcements had a little girl with holding a bat with a glove, and they got more. A lot of their congratulations were for their baby boy, because it wouldn't have dawned on anyone that a girl could possibly have, it was all pink, but for some reason. My mom, to show my mom is not the baseball fan, but my dad is. It said just in time for spring training on the birth announcements. I'm like, no, I made it for opening day, damn it. I missed spring training.
That's
Sorry.
Great. That's great.
Yeah, 3 weeks old, I went to my first ball game and kind of went from there.
So now you were 3 weeks old, your first baseball
3 weeks old, your first game.
Yeah, I once met a parents who brought a baby who was only 1 week old. So it's not, it's the only other time, but it's like somebody out there beat me.
My daughter, when I was with Cleveland, she was a week old.
Okay, there you go. So now there's two.
She brought her from Baltimore to Cleveland, and they had an air show. The old municipal stadium, they had an air show, and it was loud, but she hung in there, and we're crazy for bringing her. But that was, hey.
See, it's not that crazy,
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Not at all.
So now in reading up on you a little bit and leading into the topic of the baseball, I read that you're also, in addition to being an astrophysicist, you have like a great knowledge and skill in knitting. Mm-hmm. And did that predate your interest in the baseball? And how has that played into your knowledge of what's inside a baseball?
Yeah, the knitting actually did turn out to be critical for being able to study the interior of the baseball at all. In fact, that background also helped motivate my very first study, which was when everyone was looking at the 2017 home run surge. You remember this, like at the time, now we all think of, oh yeah, the baseball was juiced, as if somehow the baseball was the obvious culprit. But when we were looking at it, and by we, I mean, there were a lot of people. We didn't know MLB had a commission. There was just a lot of different people looking from a lot of different ways. And some people thought that it was that the players were juicing again. Some people thought that maybe special bats were showing up. A few of us looked at the ball, but in different ways. Rob Arthur actually looked at CAT scans of the pill to see if that was what was going on. Oh yeah, there's the inside.
That's the inside.
The pill. And so I'd actually looked at the interior specifically, and this is why show and tell helps. Mm-hmm. You can see here there are 3 layers of yarn in addition to this. This is narration for people who don't have video. So you've got the cover. You have 3 layers of yarn, which wool yarn, and then there is what's called a cork and rubber core or pill on the inside. And the thing is that there actually is historical, evidence to suggest that changing the yarn can in fact change how the ball behaves. The switch from the dead ball to the live ball era, and there were a lot of different things that impacted it, but one of them seems to be that it was just after World War I, and it was war, so the quality of a lot of things had gone down during the war. MLB switched back to using Australian merino wool, which is high quality wool, and the ball became livelier. And so there was this, at the time, people wanted the ball to have been intentionally juiced, and all the commissioner would say is, no, we switched back to this higher quality wool. This is actually a debate that I've had with people, including John Thorne, who, I love John, by the way, but this is an ongoing debate with us, that the type of wool could somehow affect how the ball behaves. As a knitter, I can tell you that the type of wool actually does make a difference in how, something knits up, how it hangs, all the stuff. So that's a possibility. But the point is, I looked into that for the home run surge, and it was because of that knowledge that wool can do something different and that knitting has an effect.
So before I turn you over to Ross for a couple of questions, because he actually used to throw a baseball, my question is, are all of your analysis, do you sort of make the presumption that Major League Baseball alters the ball on purpose to get a certain, effect? Or is it possible that sometimes the changing of the wool or something is an economic thing that the company that makes the baseballs, I just want to hear what you say about that, whether it's malicious or an active attempt to change the game of baseball.
Well, the first few studies, and it's insane that this is year 5 of doing these, there really was no evidence of any kind of intent to change the ball. The closest that you got to that was that MLB did know going into 2019 that rocket ball that they did, that the drag was lower, and it was in fact reported in the New York Post in like the first week of the season that MLB internal testing had found lower drag. Never showed up again. They could have told players, because less drag means that it's going to travel farther, which means more home runs. So they would have known ahead of time that we would have had more home runs, but somehow that never got past that one story. But even there appeared to be a good reason for why that change would have been made. It was just a question of disclosing the effects. The only time, or the first time I should say, that I ran into a situation where there was an intentional change, which was actually 2020, although because of the COVID shortened season, we didn't really see strong effects of that change till 2021 because they kept doing it. It was very clear that it had to be a manufacturing change because of all of the data I was able to collect. There were sort of too many things for it to be an accident or economics. But then MLB actually acknowledged that they had made the change. They didn't acknowledge it till after we asked, but they did at least acknowledge it. So the only times that there has been an intentional change, MLB has ultimately admitted to having done it. And otherwise, every change that I found, every conspiracy that people had, certainly up through the end of 2019, even the 2019 postseason, they used 2 different baseballs in the 2019 postseason. Even that had an economic justification. And they were 2 completely different baseballs.
Well, I remember the
still
big thing is, again, before Ross comes on and asks you a series of questions, I remember for as long as I can remember, the balls were made in Haiti. And then I guess Haiti closed down or something. And
there was a lot of civil unrest.
Where are they made now?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. Okay. Ross, go ahead. Buddy.
Yeah. Meredith, back in the 70s, obviously being a pitcher and pitching, we would get balls that a hitter would hit and they would be lopsided. I don't think that happens as much now. But you don't hear a lot. Do you hear much about that?
Well, here's the thing. You didn't until this season. I kid you not. This new type of baseball, this newly designed deadened baseball. And just to be clear, when I talked about an intentional change by MLB of the baseball to deaden it, and that's what they said the change was supposed to do. It's the first change. I've got baseballs going back into the 80s. I'd love some from earlier. So if you have any lying around.
Well, if I got one, I know. I was thinking about that today too.
Yeah, because I've got it. I've actually been looking at stuff historically, but if I've got balls going back decades, and the interior of the ball, like the different, how much yarn is used for a given layer, the overall weight, things, because I'll look at all of these different aspects. The balls are the same on the inside going back decades until this redesign that they started doing in 2020, this intentional change. Once they started putting those dead balls in the humidor, we went back to lopsided. I'll send you a video of this actually, because I took one that was pretty dramatic, but you'll hear reports from pitchers about balls having flat spots, and they'll throw them out because they have flat spots. What's happening is when the ball, these deadened balls end up behaving differently when they're put in the humidor, and they'll actually expand in a way that they'll first of all, they end up expanding such that the seams actually get higher while they're in the humidor. So because basically it's easier to expand where there's a gap in the cover. So it's not pressing in as hard on the seams as it is everywhere else. So when the entire ball, and this becomes, believe it or not, is because of that wool yarn, so it's back to the knitting, the seams end up expanding more, so you get higher seams. But the other thing is, by virtue of the fact that it's sitting on a shelf or in a box when it expands, you get a flat spot on the bottom. I have a great video I took of a game ball somebody sent me, and it absolutely ends up rolling back and forth on this flat spot that's just sitting there.
Oh, I know. I got some balls back.
Baseballs this season.
I got some balls back that were flat. I go, God, that guy knocked the crap out of it, and it was flat. The other thing is, back in the 70s, I don't remember if it was the middle 70s, early 70s, every Wednesday, they would have these X19 or X something balls. They were rabbit balls. And I look back, check into it. but every Wednesday the scores would be higher. They would use these jacked up balls.
This
That
is
was-
back in the 70s, Ross?
Yes,
Which,
that was
what years? What years?
it was in I think it was the mid 70s.
You and I are talking after this because I want to hear more about this. No, I'm serious. I've never
That's
heard
one
this
of the
story
things. Now,
before.
I don't know how legit that is, but it was mentioned. It was always talked about because we didn't want to pitch on Wednesdays because the balls were flying, and the
Sure.
scores would be 12-11, 15-9. There'd be a lot of big scores, and that was the rumor that was going around. How true that is, I'm not sure, but that was something that was mentioned, and the scores were always elevated. So that I don't know. I don't know how to check it out.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, I'm serious. We should talk offline with this because
Yeah.
if there's one thing that I have learned, it's that if you want to learn about what's happening with the baseball, you start by talking with the players.
Exactly.
I'm always astonished when I have conversations with people who are looking at, the ball itself or, possible changes, or they'll look at like this when the new StatCast data came online for like 2015, but they've never talked to the players. It's like, why are they're not even reading the interviews? And it's like, but you guys use the ball every single day. I mean, or even did you guys follow it all? There was reporting by, I think it was Evan Drellich did it in The Athletic a month or two ago about them testing pre-tacked baseballs in the Texas and Southern leagues earlier this year.
I don't know.
Pre what?
Pre-tacked. So like how Japanese balls
Right.
are
Okay.
NTB. So basically there's tacking on, and this gets talked
Okay.
about every year so that, like there's no need for sticky stuff because it's already on the ball.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so they tested two kinds of pre-tacking in AA. And I've run into this in other contexts. I actually ended up with pre-tacked balls because of that. And there are two kinds. I was expecting to see two kinds. But the thing is, the test did not go well. But even more than that, part of the reason the test didn't go well was because, not just because of the balls, but because the people who designed the testing they wanted to use pitchers, but they didn't bother to talk to pitching coaches about, say, how a bullpen session is used. So one pitcher was talking about, for his warm-ups, they hand him some of these balls and they're like, okay, throw a slider as like his first pitch.
And he goes, I don't throw sliders in my.
Exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
Did you know what his warm-ups were supposed to? You don't just walk into the bullpen and for your
Right.
first pitch throw a slider. That's not how it's done. But the people who organized the test, and I understand why they wanted the information, but the context in which they were trying to do it, if they had talked to the players or talked to the pitching coaches, they would have known that, no, that's not when you ask for a slider. It's just, that's not how it works. So yeah, that's what I mean about, there's a lot that you see where it doesn't go back to the players, it doesn't go back to the coaches. And I honestly have yet to run into a situation where information from the players did not point me in the right direction for answering the question.
Do you talk to a lot of players? Obviously you do or try to.
I try to. I've talked to. It's gotten easier over the years, and it's all sorts of contexts. I mean, in some cases, it really are guys who are current. I love talking to guys who used to play as well, because things like this. I've never heard about
Ross
balls in
has got
the 70s.
Ross has got a Rolodex of names for you if you need them.
We need to talk, yeah. But players, coaches, there's a whole bunch of people, and frankly, just even reading interviews and watching interviews also helps, because sometimes I don't talk necessarily to the players, but I'll talk to people who talk to the players, and that helps too.
There wasn't a whole lot in the 70s, and I played 70, 81, 80, and 82, and there wasn't a big thing about baseballs. It just wasn't that big a deal. And then all of a sudden, then I coached for 31 years. And what we noticed, and I was just telling Stan earlier, that guys were hitting home runs that normally didn't hit home runs. I mean, a guy hit 5 or 6, he's hitting 20. We're going, wait a minute. There's something wrong. And then you see some of the balls that are going to the opposite fields on almost not a full swing. And so now you start.
When are we, was this 2019?
Well, no, this was, no. This was,
When he coached.
when I coached in even the 90s.
No, but what level were you coaching at?
In AAA.
Okay. All right.
But they used
at that time.
but Ross, they used a different baseball.
No, exactly. But still, you watch the big league games, and that was happening too. And that's what I'm saying. You notice that these guys, and that was the talk with a lot of players, that will even go to the big leagues and come back. The balls are flying. So that's when everybody started. Wait a minute, something's crazy here, and that's one of the things. But Meredith, one of the things I wanted to ask you. Getting the baseballs, how tough was that for you to get balls from the major leagues?
Well, Major League Baseball has never actually given me any baseballs directly.
Right.
So I had asked early on, but that was not something that was possible. It's become clear over the years that it really is something where I have to get baseballs from on the field. Now, when I say that, it's batting practice nowadays is actually not bad because and Ross, you'll remember this from when you played, the practice balls were marked very clearly as practice balls. They either had a stamp on them or a Sharpie mark or something like that. Nowadays, very few baseballs are actually stamped practice. So you'll see pearls show up in batting practice all the time that frankly are game quality. I've heard talk from players, pitchers who've pitched a long time about the quality of the balls in the bullpen having improved, where before they were throwing what were effectively practice balls that sort of fit your lopsided description, and by a few years ago they had proper game balls. So the quality has gone up, which means that I can, and because they're not necessarily practice, I can use them for my studies as long as I separate them out if they actually have a stamp on them or some identification that says they're for practice. But that's helped to get them. But otherwise, I fans send them to me now, which is great. Ball hawks are awesome. They can catch, some of them can catch an awful lot of baseballs. But yeah, I do need things from on field, and it's not because this is on my own research, so it's not like I can go out and buy,
right,
however many authenticated baseballs. Plus, the earlier studies were with a couple dozen baseballs. We're halfway through the season now, not even, and I've already looked at 150 baseballs. Last year's study, where I found the 2 baseballs for 2021, was the total study for the entire season was 169. And I'm already well beyond that.
Take me through when you get a baseball. Is the first thing, does it get sawed in half?
Nope. Do you want to see?
Yeah, when you look at a baseball, what are you looking at and looking for?
There's a couple of things. First, I actually do external measurements.
Okay.
And some of this is the standard, the size, the weight, the stuff that shows up for the within the rules. I'll do more detailed measurements that have to do with like the cross sections, and there are ways where you can figure out, you can call it seam height, I guess, which is just sort of how deformed the ball is from being spherical. So there's a few ways you can think of seam height, but like when I'm talking about, for instance, of those dead balls expanding in a way that makes the seams higher, I can end up measuring that. And also, frankly, how deformed they are, like, how lopsided they are is another thing. Once I take all the outside stuff, I do take them apart. Okay. So I don't know if
you take them apart stitching.
I actually unlace them. Yeah. So what we have here are, just so people can see, this is a game ball, and I'll take the cover off, and I do actually unlace the ball and take the laces separately. And this turned out to be key to figuring out how the 2017 ball was different, because it turned out the 2017 ball, that first home run search ball, the laces were thicker than in previous years. And going back to your stuff, Ross, what I have since found, just preliminary stuff, but I have like 1,000 baseballs, like
they're basically back in Wisconsin waiting for me, going back into, into the 80s, where it looks to me like that lace thickness thing might actually relate to home run rate. That thicker laces might correspond to years where there are more home runs. Because the lace thickness
do the thicker laces, are they higher?
Oh, no, see, this is what's great. Back to the knitting, believe it or not, they're not, because seam height is not the same as lace thickness. I don't, do you have a ball in front of you there, Ross?
No, I just want around here. Not
I
really.
was gonna say, how can you not have a baseball? This is insane.
No, I got one there hanging around somewhere.
Anyway.
But no, I know that the thickness, we always wanted to raise the seams.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well that's you can, I guess, although they use them so quickly that you don't really get a chance.
Yeah.
But not nowadays.
We could raise them before,
Oh,
a little bit, and obviously
sorry.
the higher the seams, the more movement you're going to get on the ball as a pitcher. The lower the seams, the less movement, and that was one of the things that college had lower seams.
Yep.
I think years ago, and major leagues had higher seams.
Yeah. What ends up happening with the lace thickness, actually, it's because the laces are cotton, is why it makes a difference. So like if you've ever had, the best way to think of this, baseballs have been air dried historically, except for 2019, which is actually why that got weird. The thing is, because it's air dried and the cotton air dries, air dried cotton actually behaves in a very particular way if it's wet. And the reason the balls are wet, obviously, is because the leather starts out flat and you need to be able to curve it around the ball. So if you soak the leather, you can then curve it to stitch the covers in place. If you've ever had a cup of coffee, you spill coffee on your shirt, you go out in the bathroom and you scrub it out and there's a divot in your shirt for the rest of the day. That's because you have a t-shirt that's cotton and it air dries, as opposed to like if you wash it and throw it in the dryer and then it comes back good as new. The thing is with thicker laces, so having the laces that are cotton and wet, they're under tension. So when it dries, the way they stretch stays stretched. Thinner laces are going to stretch more. And the more they stretch, the more lopsided the ball becomes. The more lopsided the ball becomes, the less easy it is for it to travel farther because it has more drag. So thicker laces actually end up keeping the ball rounder, which means you get more home runs.
Aha.
Cool, huh? And the knitting is what comes in there.
There you go.
I want to go back to the supposition that whenever we talk about the ball being juiced, it's as if Major League Baseball wants there to be more home runs, but yet Major League Baseball wants games to go faster, supposedly. It seems like it's in contradiction to added offense in the game that they've juicing the balls. Does that make any sense, or am I not explaining?
I mean, it's what's been interesting is that it seems like the pace of play thing and making the games exciting, how they choose to address and solve the problem seems to change year to year.
Yes, it does.
But what concerns me is that they won't like have a single change and then let it take. They want to give it a year a lot of times. And so you'll see multiple changes come in. Sometimes over the course of a season, you'll see new changes come in. And so it can be very hard to tell what's having the effect. So I'm not really sure, with assuming the goal is pace of play, it's very hard to tell what of the half a dozen changes they've made is making things better or worse or not changing at all.
So my question really gets down to, do you think if there is a supposition that Major League Baseball is doing this, like pulling the strings?
Well, they are changing the ball on purpose. We know that.
But I mean, for the purpose of having more home runs, is that somehow, do they have some algorithms that say, boy, if we up the home runs over the next 5 years by 500 or 1,000 home runs, we're going to all make more money? I mean, what is the end game to their changing of the baseball?
Ultimately, I actually don't know. But it's not quite to your point, but it's more about the way that they've done things.
the first evidence I had of an intentional redesign change to the baseball was for the 2020 season. Had 2020 been a full season instead of the COVID shortened season,
Right.
it would have looked pretty much, in some ways it would have looked like 2021, because they had made 2/3 of production was the old ball. Believe it or not, what we think of the old ball, the one that goes back decades, is what we now call the juiced ball. Not kidding.
Okay.
It's just because it's relative. And then 1/3 of production was that deadened ball. Because they only had 2 months of the season, they came out with a statement saying somehow, yeah, we decided that this was a test run and we were never going to use them, which is easy to say after the fact. But had they had a full season, had they played spring training plus 6 months of baseball plus the postseason, they would have had to use those baseballs. They didn't make enough to not. And then in addition to that, and by the way, when they made those balls, it wasn't like they did, 4 months or something of making that new ball and then they switched back, or vice versa. They actually made a few months of what we now call the juice ball.
Right.
4 months of that deadened ball, and then they switched back to making the juice ball. So they made it like in the middle of production and switched back. So it was like I couldn't see there being a way to sort of argue that it was only for one thing. Like you would have had to have both balls. When they did 2021 production, it was the same. It was in fact the same calendar, basically. It was really odd. And so for 2 years in a row, they manufactured, and this was like a hard switch. Actually, here, this is where the astrophysicist stuff comes in. The reason I was able to figure out what month the baseball was done in, can you see those letters?
Yep.
So it says, let's see, is that I think it says EB, LB, LSE.
EB, LB, LSE. Yep.
Right. Rawlings uses something that's called the Black Horse Code. And so the letters correspond to the word, to numbers in the word Black Horse. So B is 1, L is 2, and up to E is 0. So EB is 0, 1, LB is 2, 1, and then LSE is 2, 9, 0. The 0, 1 is January. The 2, 1 is 2021, and then 2, 9, 0 is essentially a production week.
Okay.
And we'll have consecutive production weeks, in fact, going back into the 90s. But that's how I was able to find that they were making, say, all of the dead balls in a consecutive 4-month period. Where the issue comes in is they kept switching back and forth every few months between making dead balls and juice balls for all of 2020 production, all of 2021 production, in a way where you couldn't have had just one ball or the other. And for everything you hear about, them eventually trying to get to one ball, you don't manufacture like there didn't even seem to be a preferential ball. It was almost like they were going for a 50-50 split. I don't know why they would choose to do that. What I do know is that the data support that the point was 2 baseballs. And so I don't know how that fits into juiced or not, because I mean, these weren't juiced. If you want juiced, or some balls they knew were going to travel farther, that was in 2019. They knew that ball was traveling farther before the season started. In these, it was the normal ball and when they didn't. And they made both in a way where both would be used during the season.
So the number of home runs that we're getting, is that always a product of the ball? Because we also have players in the 90s that were juicing themselves. And then you had, I don't know exactly when, the introduction of the launch angle, which does make sense to hit more home runs.
Mm-hmm.
You got to hit the ball higher and it'll go further. So is it a confluence of things that are leading to the home runs?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it get down to factually it's the baseball?
It is a confluence of things. So if we could keep the baseball the same, you would probably see home runs going up. But then again, you're seeing strikeouts going up. So right. The idea, the term 3 true outcomes. which is home runs, strikeouts, and walks. The idea
Right.
being that that's something that it basically you take the defense out entirely.
Right. Right.
And we really have drifted, a little far into 3 true outcomes baseball, because that turns out, in terms of the analytics, that wins games. So there's that, and players frankly are getting fitter. They're getting stronger. Even without PEDs, this would be happening. This is not an issue. One thing, just to go back to the steroid era, yes, there absolutely, were steroids being used. We have evidence of that, although I still feel like we scapegoated players because it was more convenient than to look at things overall. However, at the beginning of that period, if you look at home run rates, they jump very quickly over, I think it's 92 to 94. There's suddenly a massive spike. That is just after they switched from manufacturing in Haiti to manufacturing in Costa Rica. And the hardest part of making a baseball is actually stitching the ball closed.
That's the hardest part of
by far, and it's done all by hand. There is a learning curve. I want very much to look more closely at those baseballs, because what I suspect happened was it just took a few years for them to get enough of a good startup in Costa Rica for them to stitch the baseball tightly enough for them to stay round. This gets back to them being lopsided. So the fact that, the other thing is, if you just think about the numbers, first there's this massive increase, then there's the same amount the following year. So let's say we've got, 20% of players suddenly start juicing one year. We need another 20% the next year to account for those numbers, because it goes up a second.
Right.
And then it stays kind of flat for a while, even after the steroid era ends. So what happened? Like everybody stopped using, and yet somehow home runs didn't go down. I'm not actually, this is again, something else I want to look into. I'm not really sure juicing had as much of an impact as people think.
Well, what's fascinating.
I agree with you 100% on
Thank you.
What's fascinating also in this is, if you go back even before Ross's career, in 1961, there were 4 expansion teams in Major League Baseball, and the pitching wasn't as good.
Yep.
That would have led, didn't we have 2 expansion teams in 97, Ross? Didn't Tampa and
the Rockies were 97 too, I believe, right?
Yeah, Rockies and Tampa, I think, came in 97. We could go hours. Will you come back on with us sometime, Meredith?
Happy to. Yeah.
Okay. But I do
let me ask one more question.
You ask one, and then I've got one more.
The baseballs this year. Now, there's rumors that there's 2 different kinds of baseballs this year. What have you found with that? And the reason I ask that is if there's one that's livelier than the other one, now you've got gambling in baseball. I'm going. Yeah,
that's been my concern with the 2 baseballs. In fact,
really,
not necessarily. Like it hasn't fit with what I've seen yet, but it's something that I feel like somebody needs to take that into account.
Well, really, if I know that a batch of balls are going to the Yankees and they're playing Houston, I'm betting the over on runs. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that you hear. But
then the night you're betting over is Garrett Cole pitching against Justin Verlander.
Well,
and they also take.
You're not going to do that.
They also take into account that in the number, the over/under number too.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as the 2 baseballs this year, what I've pretty much seen for the first 6 weeks or so of the season, I was seeing what I'd expected, which was these leftover 2021s, and they were basically all dead balls. Around the middle of May, I did start seeing balls that were made specifically for 2022. There's a transition in the middle of August of 2021, and then balls made after that transition to the new production cycle. That new production cycle, everything on the inside of the ball, all the specs seem to be the same as for the dead 2021 balls. However, that spike, that jump in fly ball distances and number of home runs looks like it's real. And the only thing that I could find was that we started seeing 2022 baseball. So I'm still looking into that because, I found a difference. I'm not sure what's different about the ball that would have done that, but I've got one variable and one change. So the odds of them not being related would be odd. What I have not seen yet is we went through so many leftover 2020s last season that like half of production never got used from 2021. And I mean, that actually stands out pretty strongly in my data. So they used a lot of leftover 2021 dead balls in the first 6 weeks. I really haven't seen much of the juiced ball. That doesn't mean it's not out there, but they're somewhere. They've
So
got to be somewhere.
they used the baseballs from last year, this year?
Mm-hmm.
That aren't used.
And they used the baseballs from 2020 last year.
And,
Okay.
and with the fact that there's a carryover of the balls just sitting there,
Mm-hmm.
what does that do to the baseballs that they haven't, that they were just sitting around for 9 months or a year?
There's already a good 6-month lag in general, so
Okay.
it's you can see a little bit of a difference,
Okay.
but it's not as big as you'd think. By the time you're putting the balls in the humidor, they're all still whatever. They're not great. But
I want to ask you one last question. It has nothing to do with the baseball, but you're an astrophysicist, and the only thing I know about astrophysicists is how to spell it. So tell me if you being an astrophysicist, will this help you answer my question? Will they be able, in the robot umpires, will they be able to actually work it correctly, that it creates a strike zone that we can live with?
I'm not sure. It's the problem is the reason, as far as I can tell,
Yeah.
the main reason for having a robot umpire is to, get borderline calls right. I mean, you can fix the egregious ones for sure, but where the robo umps break down is at the edge of the strike zone.
Yeah.
And so I think we might start getting more frustrated than anything, because until we can get a robo ump to make a very fast turnaround in terms of figuring out a ball or a strike when it's right on the edge, that's something that it hasn't been perfected yet.
See, I have a different opinion of why they're trying to do it. I don't think it's necessarily to get the edge of the strike zone. I think it's that Monday night and Friday night and Saturday afternoon, a strike is a strike. And what you do is you take the human element out of it, which I'm all in favor of, because I think the umpires' strike zones differ wildly. I mean, I saw a game the other night, this guy, Darren Rackley, in the White Sox game. They just kept saying, Steve Stones just kept saying, that's not a strike. And then they'd show the thing, and it wasn't a strike. And he missed like 5 or 6 of them. That seems grossly unfair to a pitcher that gets him, that the next night there's a different umpire there. And that's where I think they're coming from.
Well, every hitter's going to have a different strike zone.
Yeah.
Every hitter's going to have a different strike zone until they come up with some way to do it. But again, I think you take the human element out of the game. That's just another thing you take out of it. It's going to be total.
I guess I'm not a fan.
I'm not either.
I am.
What I do wonder about is also the standard to which they are choosing to hold people. Somebody put up the video on Twitter the other day of, I want to say it was the 1997 NLCS, and a whole bunch of called strikes that were like 6 inches out of the zone, because there was no K zone. And this you actually can't look at is people who've looked at umpire strike zones over the years, and particularly after the K zone was introduced. They are really, really good. We're holding them to this weirdly artificial standard that is, I mean, I guess with a lot of those things, I feel like if you want the ball to always be predictable, if you want the strike zone to be perfect, if you want every one of those probabilities to pan out the way you think, there's this great video game called MLB The Show. And if you play that, then it'll probably do what you want. Otherwise, if you want human beings and real baseballs and weather and all that stuff, go to a game, watch a game.
She is Meredith Wills, a renowned astrophysicist. And if somebody wanted to send you a baseball or communicate with you, how would they do that, Meredith?
I'm mostly on Twitter, and I hope you guys put this up somewhere because you were talking about spelling, and this makes it worse. My handle is short for baseball astrophysics, but it's BBL_, and then the word astrophysics with no I in it. When I made the handle, there was a character limit, and so I had to leave it out.
Okay.
But if you look for me on Twitter, my DMs, my direct messages are open. Reach out. Yes, people do that, and absolutely send me baseballs. It would be great.
And you and Ross are going to communicate via email, correct?
Oh yeah.
And you'll
Definitely.
trade.
Yeah,
You'll get his phone number.
we do it. We're on Twitter, whatever the hell you want to do.
Well, I'll tell you.
It's all good.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing. You were right. I said we usually do these 25 to 30 minutes, and you said I can go longer because there's a lot to talk about. We went 50
There
minutes.
is. It's a ton of stuff. It's great. And I really, Meredith, we
Yeah.
appreciate this so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you.
Very
Thanks for
interesting.
having me.
Very interesting. All right. Before we leave, and Meredith, you don't have to hang around for me to do the Costas Inn commercial, but I have
Actually,
to
it
do
made me
again.
hungry last time.
It did make
but-
you hungry?
Yeah.
Well,
Hey,
the
you don't know
Costas
how
Inn,
good this crabs. Have you had steamed crabs?
you ever had
Yeah.
steamed crabs? Yeah.
They
I
are-
love
hey,
I love seafood in Baltimore. Are you kidding?
Oh,
All right.
the-
Well,
the,
you'll have to let
fabulous.
us,
Costas is great if you ever go there.
if you're ever coming to Baltimore, you'll let me know and we'll go to a game and I'll take you to Costas for crabs.
I'm gonna hold you to that.
All
Yeah.
right. They've got incredible steamed crabs, great crab cakes, the crab soup's off the charts, but they also have a full menu of other things like steaks and salads, chicken dishes, great desserts, and they've got TVs all over the place. If you're comfortable sitting in the Costas Inn at 4100 North Point Boulevard, but if you're not quite there yet, you can go to costasinn.com, order your food, pay for it online, and then pick it up at the Costas Inn, and you won't have to sit with people. The Costas Inn, it's really a great place. Well, you'll
Yeah.
sit with people, but you'll go home to the people that you feel safe with. That's what I meant. All right.
They got karaoke night too, which is a blast. And if you like to
I don't
gamble,
think-
they got
I'm
Keno.
only well, the gambling not interested, but if you take me, you have to do it on karaoke night.
I don't
Oh,
think
God,
they have.
yes,
I
no.
don't think they have karaoke night anymore.
They
Do they
don't have
not?
it anymore?
I think that went by the wayside during the pandemic. I
Oh,
think
we
that
got to
went-
talk to guys about that.
Yeah.
We'll
All
do
right.
a special one.
All right, we'll try and work it out. Meredith Wills, thank you very much, Dr. Wills, for being on with us. All
Thank you.
right. That wraps up our show for tonight. Ross and I will be back with you shortly. All right. Bye.